Quintessential British family, always polite, always proper. They lived in a cozy terraced house in Brixton, a neighborhood known for its vibrant culture and close-knit community. Their home was a sanctuary of warmth and tradition. They had a son, Harold, their pride and joy. Harold was a bright and cheerful boy, always curious and full of life. Life was a cup of tea and a digestive biscuit. Every afternoon, the family would gather for tea, sharing stories and laughter. Simple pleasures for simple folk, or so it seemed. Their days were filled with routine and comfort, a stark contrast to the chaos of the outside world. Mr. Bramble, you see, wasn't quite what he appeared to be. Beneath his calm exterior, there was a hidden layer of complexity. Behind the neatly trimmed beard and spectacles, a secret simmered. A secret that he guarded closely, even from his beloved family. A secret that could shatter their world of normalcy. The weight of this secret was a constant burden, a shadow over their seemingly perfect life. Mrs. Bramble, a woman of impeccable composure, lived in constant fear of this secret unraveling. She sensed the tension, though she never spoke of it. Harold, blissfully unaware, was the apple of their eye. His innocence was a beacon of light in their lives. He was being raised on a diet of Dickens and good manners. Books were his window to the world, and his parents ensured he grew up with strong values. Boxing, with its unsavory characters and bruised knuckles, was a world away from their carefully curated reality. It was a world they never imagined would touch their lives. Little did they know, it was a world Mr. Bramble knew intimately. His past was intertwined with the very world he now sought to protect his family from. Harold, a bright and curious boy, was a testament to his upbringing. He excelled in his studies, favored classical music over the wireless, and could recite Shakespeare with the best of them. His parents, particularly his mother, had done a stellar job in shaping him into a fine young gentleman. Boxing, in their household, was a dirty word. It represented everything they wished to shield Harold from. Violence, aggression, the raucous crowds. It was all deemed uncivilized. Little did Harold know his father could have schooled him on the sweet science of a left hook. Harold, in his innocence, believed his father to be a mild-mannered clerk at the local library. Mr. Bramble, for his part, played the role with Oscar-worthy conviction. He'd swap his boxing gloves for reading glasses and regale Harold with tales of overdue books and Dewey Decimal adventures. The truth, however, was far more exciting. Mr. Bramble, the unassuming librarian, was in fact Basher Bramble, the reigning heavyweight champion of England. His thunderous right hook was the stuff of legend, his footwork as graceful as any ballet dancer. His double life was a carefully guarded secret, known only to his wife and his trusted friend, Major Percy Stokes. The good Major, a retired military man with a penchant for intrigue, had taken it upon himself to manage Mr. Bramble's affairs, both in and out of the ring.
The charade was elaborate and at times downright ridiculous.
Mr. Bramble would sneak out under the cover of darkness, his gym bag disguised as a basket of laundry. Mrs. Bramble, a master of subterfuge, would invent elaborate alibis involving book clubs and late-night errands. Major Percy Stokes, a man of booming laughter and even louder waistcoats, was instrumental in maintaining the facade. He would handle the press, the promoters, the whole shebang, ensuring that the name Bramble was never uttered in the same breath as Basher within a 5-mile radius of Brixton. The more ludicrous the tale, the more the press lapped it up. Percy's finest hour, however, was yet to come. The annual heavyweight championship was fast approaching, and with it, the pressure to keep Mr. Bramble's secret identity under wraps was reaching fever pitch. Percy was a master of diversion. He'd spin yarns about Mr. Bramble's supposed ailments, his crippling fear of violence, even his undying devotion to his collection of antique thimbles. The air crackled with anticipation. The energy was palpable, a mix of excitement and anxiety that seemed to electrify the very atmosphere. Everyone knew that this was not just another fight. It was a clash of titans, a battle that would be talked about for years to come. The Basher was set to defend his title against Hurricane Higgins, a match that had been hyped for months. The Basher, known for his relentless power and unyielding spirit, was the reigning champion, and he had no intention of giving up his title easily. Hurricane Higgins, on the other hand, was a brute of a man with a left hook that could knock a man into next Tuesday. His reputation preceded him, and many believed that he was the only one who could dethrone the Basher. The newspapers were having a field day, with headlines screaming about the upcoming showdown. Journalists were busy crafting stories, each trying to outdo the other with sensational predictions and dramatic narratives. The public was on tenterhooks, eagerly discussing the fight in cafes, bars, and living rooms. Bets were being placed, and everyone had an opinion on who would emerge victorious. And the Brambles were on edge. The tension in their household was almost unbearable, each family member dealing with their own fears and anxieties.
Despite my calm exterior, I was a bundle of nerves. Every fiber of my being was taut with anticipation, and I could barely keep my hands from trembling. I yearned to share my passion with Harold, to let him see the world through my eyes, to feel the rush of adrenaline that came with every punch and every cheer from the crowd, to bask in the adulation of the crowd, to hear the roar of approval that could make a man feel invincible. But the fear of shattering his carefully constructed world held me back. I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing him, of revealing the truth that might change everything.
Mrs. Bramble, ever the pragmatist, threw herself into the task of maintaining their double life. She was the glue that held everything together, the one who made sure that their secret remained just that, a secret. She concocted a tale of a distant relative's illness, a story so elaborate and convincing that no one would dare question it. A fictional ailment so grave and so contagious that it required a fortnight's quarantine in the remote Scottish Highlands. It was the perfect cover, a story that would buy them the time they needed.
We had to keep up appearances no matter the cost. Every smile, every word, every action had to be carefully calculated to maintain the facade. This story would buy us the time we needed. It was a delicate balance, a tightrope walk that required constant vigilance and unwavering resolve.
And so, the stage was set. The preparations were complete, and all that was left was to wait for the inevitable clash. The big fight was approaching, and the Brambles were doing everything they could to keep their secret safe. They knew that the stakes were high and failure was not an option. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back now. Fate, however, had other plans. The day of the championship fight arrived, and Harold, feeling a touch under the weather, decided to stay home from school. He was lounging in the parlor, nursing a cup of warm milk and flipping through the newspaper, when his eyes fell upon a photograph that made his jaw drop.
There, on the front page in all his glory, was Basher Bramble, his gloved fists raised in victory, a triumphant grin on his face. And standing beside him, adjusting his championship belt with a twinkle in his eye, was none other than Major Percy Stokes.
Harold's world tilted on its axis. His father, the mild-mannered librarian, was a prizefighter. The Basher Bramble? It was too much to comprehend. He raced upstairs, newspaper in hand, a whirlwind of confusion and wonder. Harold burst into his parents' room, brandishing the newspaper like a badge of honor.
"Father, is this you?"
he exclaimed, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning excitement. Mr. Bramble, caught off guard, looked at his wife, then back at his son. He knew the game was up. He took a deep breath and confessed. To his surprise, Harold didn't recoil in horror, didn't denounce him as a fraud. Instead, his eyes widened with a hero's worship.
"You're the Basher Bramble, the heavyweight champion?"
He looked from his father to the photo, then back again. A slow grin spread across his face.
"That's brilliant."
The relief in the room was palpable. Mrs. Bramble, who had been prepared for a torrent of recriminations, let out a shaky laugh. Major Percy, who had chosen that inopportune moment to arrive with a celebratory bottle of champagne, choked on his own amusement. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. All their efforts to shield Harold from the uncouth world of boxing had backfired spectacularly. And yet here he was, not repulsed, but rather filled with pride for his father's hidden talent.
"Father, tell me everything. About the fights, the training, the roar of the crowd."
The world of boxing, once forbidden, was now a source of fascination and pride. Life for the Brambles took on a decidedly different hue after that. The days were filled with a newfound sense of freedom and joy. No longer did they have to hide behind masks or keep secrets from one another. The air in their home was lighter, filled with laughter and genuine connection. The charade was over, the gloves were off, and Mr. Bramble, the basher, the librarian, could finally be himself. He no longer had to juggle the dual identities that had once weighed heavily on his shoulders. His days at the library were now filled with a sense of peace, and his nights in the ring were met with the support of his family. Harold, it turned out, was his biggest fan, regaling anyone who'd listen with tales of his father's exploits in the ring. He would proudly show off pictures and recount every match with an enthusiasm that was infectious. His friends would gather around, eyes wide with amazement, as Harold painted vivid pictures of his father's victories. As for Mrs. Bramble, she adapted to their new reality with surprising ease. She found joy in the little things, like cooking meals for her family and sharing laughter over dinner. The transition was smoother than anyone had anticipated, and she embraced their new life with open arms. She even took to attending some of Mr. Bramble's matches, albeit with a large hat and sunglasses as a flimsy disguise. Despite her initial reservations, she found herself cheering louder than anyone else in the audience. Her pride in her husband's achievements was evident, even if she tried to hide it behind her oversized hat. After all, she was still a respectable woman from Brixton. She maintained her dignity and grace, even as she navigated this new chapter of their lives. Her interactions with neighbors were warm and genuine, and she found a sense of community that she had never experienced before.
"My father, the champion," Harold would exclaim, his eyes shining with pride. He would hold up his own trophies, inspired by his father's determination and strength. The bond between father and son grew stronger with each passing day, built on mutual respect and admiration.
The secret life of Mr. Bramble had come to an end, but in its place bloomed a new, honest, and infinitely more hilarious chapter for the Brambles of Brixton. Their days were now filled with shared stories, inside jokes, and a deeper understanding of one another. The family had never been closer. It was a testament to the enduring power of family, the surprising twists of fate, and the fact that sometimes the most unexpected truths can bring us closer together. The Brambles had discovered that honesty and love were the true cornerstones of their happiness, and they embraced their new life with open hearts and unbreakable bonds.